Hello, my creative friends, and welcome to another episode of The Daily Prompt. In this episode, I wanted to take another look at the 10,000 hour rule. Early on in this series, I don't know, the first 10 episodes or something of that, in there, I'll put a link up to it, was the original 10,000 hour rule video that I put onto this channel. Basically, there was a book called Outliers, I believe it was Outliers, by Malcolm Gladwell, wherein he talks about the 10,000 hour rule, which is this basic idea that in order to master any craft, we have to spend about 10,000 hours doing it at an increasing level of efficiency, ultimately to the point of mastery. And he looks at some examples, the Beatles and Bill Gates and somebody else who escapes me at the moment. But I've always found that to be a very useful sort of rule of thumb. How long is it going to take you to master the craft of screenwriting or storytelling at a professional level? If you were going to write novels, if you were going to write for a living, how long does it take you to actually master that craft? How long does it take you to master playing a guitar or playing the piano or playing golf or building a business or whatever it might be that you're interested in? And the reality is that as a good rule of thumb, it takes about 10,000 hours to do that. But if you do the math on that, 10,000 hours works out to be about 3 hours a day, every single day for about 10 years. So that's a lot of work. One of the great, I guess, challenges, missed opportunities, gaps in screenwriters' knowledge and pursuit of their development of their craft is that when they're thinking about those 10,000 hours and they're thinking about the time they're putting into developing that to a level of mastery, what they're missing is the fact that to actually improve to that point of mastery, you have to actually write for production. It's not enough just to learn the mechanics of the 3-act structure and then write script after script after script. It's not enough to learn about tension and pacing and suspense and all that kind of stuff and work on it and work on it and work on it for 10,000 hours. It's not enough to understand the formatting of a screenplay or to understand how the industry works or to understand competitions or agents or any of that kind of stuff. All that stuff matters. All that stuff is part of those 10,000 hours. But to actually write screenplays, we got to always remember that screenplays are an interim document. They're made to be turned into a film. The only reason we write screenplays is so that we can turn them into a film. Now, obviously, they have other uses to try to, pitch yourself and your talents, to get an agent, to win competitions, all that kind of stuff. So in the strictest sense, they don't only exist to be turned into a film, but that's what the form is. That's what we're creating. That's what it's all about. It's not about the document, because the end consumer does not consume that document. They consume the film that document has served as the blueprint for. So in acquiring those 10,000 hours, in spending the time that you've spent on all this, are you spending the time just merely writing screenplays, getting those words on the page to be more and more effective? Or are you also incorporating the realities of writing for production? Have you learned, are you developing the understanding of, are you building the skill with turning your ideas into something that if on the page effectively puts that movie in the reader's head, but that also is done in a way that we can actually go out and shoot it, that it is something that is plausible and realistic to be made at whatever budget level it's for. If you were writing an independent feature, right, something for a low budget, if you write enormous gargantuan visual effects or action sequences or giant chase scenes with multiple explosions and cars flipping over and all that kind of stuff, the challenge really is that as a lower budget independent producer, you can't necessarily make that stuff on the budget levels we're talking about. So a lot of what you're writing, you may be developing the craft of writing those stories, but are you developing the ability to write for the actual needs of the people who would say yes to the project. Because what I find along the way is that writers, and it's totally understandable, I do it too, the writers, when you start creating something, you're creating what you're passionate about. You're creating the story you want to tell. You're capturing the vision of what's in your imagination as a story to present to the audience. But ultimately, screenwriting is a team sport. You do it as a solitary writer until your project gets picked up for production, and then a whole bunch of people get involved. And then it really becomes this team effort to turn that screenplay into a film. So that one part of it may not feel like you're part of this greater team, but the reality is that you are. And so all of these 10,000 hours that you have to put towards this, the consistent, ongoing, daily action that I advocate so emphatically on this channel and in everything that I do, that consistent, ongoing, daily action is not just about creating the document itself. It really is about creating something that team of people can go out and utilize. If you're writing a big blockbuster studio franchise film, for example, if that's where you want to go, if that's what your objective is, you need to develop those skills. You need to develop the ability to tell those grander stories. So for example, if we're making a movie that's got $100 or $200 million budget, you want the spectacle, you want the big epic feeling of the thing. You still want to be able to tell the story. You need it to be engaging emotionally. You need it to be something that's going to pull an audience in and draw them through. But you want the epic nature of it. That spectacle is really part of what's going to sell the project. So if that's your ultimate goal, those 10,000 hours need to be devoted to creating those kinds of stories that are going to work in that kind of a situation, that will be able to be produced within those budget levels. You don't want to submit a little indie feature, micro budget, limited locations and limited cast and limited visual effects for the big budget studio world. It's incongruous. So as you're putting in the time and as you're developing the mastery, you need to understand what your target is. You need to put the hours in that direction. And then on some level, you need to understand how your work gets turned into a film. And that's part of what I've been trying to do here. That's part of what I'm trying to build. And the reason I'm trying to build the independent film studio is because I really don't believe that there is any place where writers get this experience. And as I was thinking about this 10,000 hour rule the other day, or this notion of just having to continually do work and continually evolve and grow your skill base, I realized that you can do that forever. You can put 10,000 hours into crafting the words on the page and really never have the full skill set to be able to sell your work. So there's this contingent of would-be screenwriters who will forever have this gap in their knowledge. They'll forever have an inability to sell their work because they don't have the full visceral understanding, the experience that comes from seeing a screenplay turned into a film. And as I was thinking about all this, I just thought it's absolutely essential as part of that 10,000 hours, as part of that road to mastery, is that experience. So how do we get that? It is my contention, it is my argument, the thing that I've been saying again and again on this channel is I believe the path to get there is to initially start writing for the lower budget, to start writing for the indie film world, because the indie film world is chronically going to be underserved by screenwriters who are looking for the big payday and going for the big Hollywood studio system, trying to pitch their 50 episode TV series, and that's what everybody's pitching these days. Everybody's got a TV series. Nobody wants to write movies anymore. But the indie films are where you cut your teeth. They're where you get your chops. They're where we put in that work to develop that material, because on a lower budget level, on an indie level, we'll be able to try things out. We'll be able to literally see, if I put this on the page, this is how that translates into the production process. This is how it ultimately translates onto the screen. I can see it's a potentially quicker, a potentially more interactive way to exercise and experience that part of the creative process. Because what you learn, what you develop from those experiences go into your creativity in all future projects. So even if you're trying to write for the big Hollywood studios, to understand the production dynamics, to understand how a word on the page gets turned into an image on the screen, to really see those differences, even if you do see those differences at an indie micro level, that knowledge, those skills will be able to be applied and adapted to the larger budget studio film world. So it is my contention, ultimately, that that when you're thinking about the 10,000 hour rule, when you're thinking about taking consistent, ongoing daily action, when you're thinking about the experience and workload that you need to do and the time you need to put into this to get really good and solid at it, please take into consideration that you also need the experience, the hands-on experience of seeing your script turned into a film, because that is part of what the mastery level is going to entail. So if you don't have a strategy for that, if you've never really given too much thought about that, if that's not something that has been incorporated into what you've been taught or what you've been pursuing or pursuing, did I say pursuing twice? If that's not part of what you're currently doing, really stop and take a moment to think about how are we going to achieve that? How are you going to go about getting that? Now, you don't have to join me. Obviously, I would like it if you did, but if you don't, you can look for local indie filmmakers in your own environment. You can in your own city or town or wherever you might be, or the nearest large city, or you can look for people who've made short films who might be wanting to venture forth into feature films. You can look for people that you find on YouTube or that you find through film festivals or that you find through a variety of places. Anyone who's out there trying to actively make material is going to be in the market for quality writing and quality storytelling. There is a dearth of quality writing and quality storytelling. There's a lot of derivative material out there. There's a whole lot of stuff that is copycat from something else, that is unimaginative, that does not have the underlying dynamics to make it a compelling, powerful story or a unique original idea that's marketable to a sufficiently wide audience, even at the micro level, even at a smaller level. There's a lot of noise out there. If you actually create material that is powerful, that is strong, that is effective, that does what you're trying to set out to do, by all means, you can reach out to those indie filmmakers. They're going to be more than excited to make new, to have new networking relationships with an emerging writer, someone who has put a lot of time and energy into something that is powerful and strong and extraordinary and still accessible. I think people underestimate how achievable this all really is and how little there is for those people to choose from. Listen, indie filmmakers, people who are cinematographers or directors or actors or producers, they don't want to write. They don't want to take the time to sit down and develop that set of skills. That's a huge set of skills that is entirely separate to directing, to acting, to writing, to producing, to cinematography. The people who generally are looking to make those kinds of projects are usually thinking from a production-driven standpoint. I've mentioned that on this series before, but if you understand that part of the 10,000 hour requirement to achieve mastery is an intuitive grasp and understanding of the production requirements of a screenplay, of the real world use of the screenplay and how to take those understandings and infuse them into your creative process. If you take that into consideration and you really understand that that's a huge and important part of it, then suddenly reaching out to even newer filmmakers, even filmmakers whose work to date you might not be super impressed by, still going above and beyond what they've done previously, making those connections, seeing if they want to expand and make something that's extraordinary at an indie level will help you way beyond whatever you think it might or might not do for your filmography or your credits list or the amount of work that you've put into it without a whole lot of pay to be shown out of it. Ultimately, until you have that breadth of experience applying to your 10,000 hour rule pursuit, until you have that breadth of experience, it's all valuable. Writing stuff that goes on to get produced, whether you get paid for it or not, whether you get your percentage or your cut or not, if it's helping you develop those skills, it's going to be valuable to you on some level. So again, I'd love it if you join me. I'd love it if you go through Fast Screenplay, develop all these skills, bump you into the writer's room where we write stuff and goes on to production. Obviously, I would love that. But I know there are a lot of people watching this that simply are never going to do that, and you don't have to do it with me. There is unlimited opportunity out here today. There is just so much. There is so much that so many people want to take advantage of and simply can't, or simply won't, because they're not going to put the time and energy into developing the writing part of the craft. So if it's the writing, if it's the storytelling, if it's that sort of mind play stuff that you enjoy, please take action. Please persist. Please keep moving forward every single day. Please chip away another hour today at your 10,000 hours. Keep doing that consistent, ongoing daily action. If you do, if you pursue it, if you widen your frame of view, if you really see the opportunities that are available to you today, and you really challenge some of the conventional wisdom, which is born out of a bygone era. If you really challenge some of that and see what's available to you today and change your thinking and focus on what can be done, you can absolutely develop these skills in ways that we never have been able to before. So, that's what I wanted to say today. So for today's daily prompt, just go ahead and look at what you're doing and think about the production part of the process and try to assess and figure out, how are you going to implement those skills? How are you going to develop that side of it? How will that fit into your strategy? If you're not going to join me, if you can't join us for whatever reason, still figure out how you're going to implement that part of the strategy for your own pursuits, because that's going to be necessary to develop the skills to get where it is you're trying to go. So take some time to think about that. Really, really sit down and consider it, because it's so doable. You just have to do it. So thank you so much for watching. Click the subscribe and the bell to be notified, and the social media stuff, and join us on webinars and in the system and whatever you want to do. But whatever you do, subscribe to this channel. We will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching. Have a kick-ass day.